The Mac and Pete Project.
I believe that Captain Pike in exile is a metaphor for us Trekkies, very reluctant to come back to Star Trek as he is to command the Enterprise again.
I get that feeling also, because the only thing that we've known about Captain Pike previously from canon was the Cage and Menagerie episodes, in which you saw a very bitter person, a very, I'm tired of being responsible for all these lives.
I'm tired of being responsible for 203 lives, and I'm tired of deciding which mission is too risky and which isn't, and who's going on the landing party and who doesn't, and who lives, and who dies.
So that would go into line with what the Cage episode, and then the ship is in, which lines up with this, with what happened in Discovery. We won't talk about Discovery, but let's stick to canon that we know. That lines up with his mood in the Cage. And then this would be after the Cage, and then what the first episode would pick up after that shore leave in Montana.
So I watched this immediately after the Picard season finale. So I'm not sure if I'm just recovering from emotional whiplash, but this was a 180-degree turn in tone, excitement, and made me excited for this series again, or this franchise.
So let's say it in this way, because you watched it right after Picard, and if anybody's watched our reviews of that, our feelings. I watched it last night when I was just in my neutral mood, and I will tell you right now, not only did I get goosebumps multiple times, not only did I smile, I laughed and got the same enjoyment. I can tell you more about the character. I know the characters, and I'm excited to see them. And there was not just a single character. Let me rephrase that. There was actual character development.
Right. And I like how all the characters were introduced, because it made sense to introduce them, because, they were in the middle of a retrofit or upgrade, and crews were coming in and out, and it's like, oh, okay, so we don't have to do the stupid thing of, introducing the audience to people the character should already know. There's a lot of fresh faces on board, and it's just, they really nailed the aesthetic.
So to me, let's talk about that for a second. So if we go back and we look at the 1960s version, the TOS of the Enterprise, this would be the NCC 1701 regular, the Pike and the Kirk version.
The same
which is the same ship. There were the nacelles had the fronts that were different on occasion because of production. But what we're looking at is, in my mind, what they would have done if they had the technology of the time. So it's not like we're very far off from that. There's some changes in the engine room. We'll probably see that a little bit more. The bridge, on the other hand, same configuration, same setup. So aesthetically, they were right on point. The lighting was on point. The technology, okay. Let me rephrase that. Most of the technology was that we're used to. Why don't we, because I think there's going to be less of this than Picard, why don't we talk about the inconsistencies first?
Okay.
So the first one that hit me was the accuracy of the transporter.
How are you, Mrs. Spock?
Okay.
So that was a big one. Also, the emergency transporter in the sick bay.
I thought that was pretty cool. What they were trying to do for Phase 2, and had the emergency bridge transporter for little tools to come in the back. So.
Correct. So I didn't dislike it, but what I was saying is that's inconsistent with what we knew about
right. because
The curtain.
McCoy would
And-
have to call to the transporter room.
Correct. So,
They
and
didn't
one
really do site-to-site transport too often in TOS, right? That was a TNG.
correct, because even in TNG, it was more of and the other thing is, I think that they didn't want to take, oh, here's our technology, and let's keep it pretty close, because if we make a massive leap, then it would be jarring. One, but two, production, there wouldn't be as awe value,
Right.
So those two things stuck out on me. We got more of what I believe the original Enterprise would have looked like, but we're not sure about it. Like what looks to be like a 10 forward type area. The windows and everything was very similar.
Wait. Why was that called 10 forward?
It's because there was a time travel thing, and ironically, the designers knew about 10 forward Guinan's bar, and Guinan was going to work there. They didn't know that, though.
It was 10
Yeah.
Forward Street. Okay. So the name of this bar is probably, because it's not a Galaxy class ship, so it's probably
Correct.
deck 5.
Correct.
So they need to find a bar that somebody worked at on 5 Forward Street.
Correct.
Which is starting to look like a pretty crowded street for bars.
Yes, this is poor San Francisco. All it has is bars, apparently. So let's talk about Khan's granddaughter.
Captain Pike, Lieutenant La'an Noonien Singh, Chief of Security. I've been assigned as acting first officer.
Welcome aboard, number 1. You've got some pretty big boots to fill.
I'm aware.
That one is a little upsetting, but I love the actress. I love how she portrayed who she was portraying. That was on point. Her motivations, I would say, are very Noonien Sung-ish, because and of course, here's the other thing. We've been speculating, well, how is this his granddaughter? So we can surmise from the little brief that Pike was reading about her.
So, I've read your file. I think I
Are
understand.
you giving me a direct order to allow sedation during this procedure, Captain?
I am not.
And I prefer to remain fully aware.
Maybe the Space Seed, the ship that went off, one of Khan's children did the same thing. And then they were caught by the Gorn. And she escaped. So that makes sense in it. The problem I'm having is you now have Spock, who's serving with the granddaughter of Khan. Now, the thing about that is, does Khan, how do I say this? Does she know that she is a descendant of Khan?
You fled. Why? Were you afraid?
I've never been afraid.
But you left at the very time mankind needed courage.
We offered the world order. We.
I know. Is it like the name Smith? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I'm just going to assume she's a generational descendant of a offspring of Khan that wasn't genetically modified. And
could be. And the other thing,
yeah,
we should also assume that we don't know how reproduction works for an augment. Are they sterile? Are they like mules? Are they can't reproduce of their own accord, or can they not pass down certain genes? We don't know that. And as they go the further from that gene, does it change? Does they get more human?
Yeah. Because
so that's something.
If they give her superhuman strength, that was probably the first thing I'll get upset with this show.
So I think the other thing that we need to look at is when Nurse Chapel gave her the shot that was genetic. One, that's the first time that we saw genetic alterations as opposed to surgical in in TNG. Also in TOS, we saw surgical alterations. So that's something that we need to. That was different.
I don't know which makes my skin crawl more, because the surgical stuff always bothered me, and then just seeing this rapid genetic alteration, it was cool and worked for the plot, you know.
And it's science fiction based, but that's like anytime you see a show that they're trying to make werewolf lycanthropy they change to that degree, and it's not like the 1940s Wolfman from the Universal Studios where it's just like a guy with fur and super strength. So I'm kind of having a hard time with the realism there on that one, but I'll give it a pass because you're right, it did fit in the story and it was nice.
But the whole entire time, like, why did they just leave Spock behind?
Right.
Why did so much problems? It's like Ortega's, come with us. Spock, you stay here.
So let's talk about Uhura. So Uhura is a cadet, which makes sense. The thing, and here's the thing that I think we should touch on. Continuity from the pilots of The Cage and Where No Man Has Gone Before, the Kirk and Pike original pilots. The uniforms, there were only operations and command.
Mm-hmm.
So there were only two uniforms. There was the gold and there was the blue. There was no red. Okay, so there's a continuity difference there. We can probably say because it was only in 3 episodes, because the Corbomite maneuver, you also saw Uhura in the gold uniform. So Uhura's uniform is different. It's like it was in all the other episodes of TOS. I can give that one a small pass. I would have been impressed if they would have made her a gold uniform. I didn't notice. I'm assuming that they did, but the insignia within the insignia within the Starfleet badge, they had, of course, they were the same. So that was a little different, and it makes sense for her to be there. It goes along with the story. Nurse Chapel, because it was Michael Barrett's character, we didn't get a lot of backstory on her. So this is a little bit more. That makes it.
Which is fine, because we have a large ensemble cast, and we didn't even get to meet the engineer this week.
And I like that because they're not forcing everybody down your throat. Because that doesn't. If you have a larger ensemble, you have to slowly, within 2 or 3 episodes, get to know them individually. And they didn't hit on every ensemble character, and that was good because it would feel forced. So we didn't get the engineer, who's an Enar, which is one of the subspecies on Andoria. We're talking about Kirk, and we're like, are we gonna see James Kirk? And all of a sudden, you see this blue uniform come out with a mustache, and I go, that's his brother. And they say, Samuel.
Captain Samuel Kirk. Welcome to Enterprise. How's the family?
All fine, sir. It's great to be here.
Tell me about Sam. George Samuel Kirk, your brother. Only you call him Sam.
I'll allow it, but we do have to put some context in it. We never saw a living, breathing version of Samuel Kirk in TOS. We only saw a picture in the season finale of season 1. And I don't remember, but there were these gel things that would fly and attach, and it killed their entire colony. So yeah, we can go past that. We could say that he might have been in Starfleet. His brother might have been in Starfleet.
He seems to be more of almost a civilian scientist.
Correct.
Have a commission.
That could be it too. So we have more episodes to see where that one goes.
But let's get down to the point of the episode.
I have a first contact scenario that may have gone bad.
Sorry to hear that.
But then we lost contact with her ship.
I'm not sure what this has to do with...
Here's her last transmission.
First contact is just a dream. Until one day, it isn't.
I told Mac the other day, I'm pretty confident in saying this was the best pilot for a Star Trek show ever. Because it...
Granted, we're both big DS9 fans, so that's hard for us to put a pilot above DS9. But I feel the same way.
So essentially, as we already stated, Pike was on shore leave, debating whether to go back or not. He's ignoring his comm badge, and Admiral Robert April has to show up personally to kick him in the butt.
And this is the first time that we see a live action version of Robert April.
We just might get you to Babel after all, Commodore.
I'll be glad to get home, but not necessarily to Babel. It only means the end of my career, Jim.
Yes.
And I like the interpretation. I'm kind of glad that they're changing things up a little bit. It's about time. But Robert April comes in a shuttlecraft very much like Star Trek V, and
that shuttlecraft just looks so good.
Yes.
Love it.
It was very sleek. It was very 23rd century technology. It was on point.
Because I only saw season 1 of Discovery, but it looked identical to what everything in Star Trek Picard, like the Stargazer and everything. And it's like those two shows took place at the same time. So
yeah. Where this very much feels like the Kirk Pike era from the original series, just if we had the production and the technology to make it this way. And that's something that we have to reiterate at times, I think.
So basically he's told he has to go find number 1. She went missing. She went on a first contact mission, and the whole ship's gone. And apparently on this ship that they took, there was only 3 crew members, which I thought was interesting. But anyway, they need to go find out what happened to her. So they rushes the ship out of dry dock, because it's the middle of retrofits, and they're like, oh, we're skipping certain upgrades, and got to go out and find her. They go to this planet and realize they are detecting a warp signature, but they can't figure out how they've done it so early in their civilization, because it's
in their development.
Yeah, it's like pretty much a little bit post-industrial. Kind of like I would say about where the United States was around in the 1950s, I would say. And
it's also fair to point out that while we're looking at this, this episode was science fiction to a T. This takes a modern day problem and puts it on another planet, and you're able to put a magnifying glass on it and see how things really are and how ridiculous things can really be. And that's what I really loved about this episode, because essentially they're talking about what's happening right now. And then, ironically enough, Star Trek usually is pretty good at telling the future. And they lined up pretty good with what was going on now with the actual timeline of Star Trek.
And what made this First Contact so different than anything we've seen before is they didn't invent a warp drive. They invented an antimatter bomb.
I've analyzed the signal variants, Lieutenant Ortegas isolated. These people have not built a warp drive. Based on these readings, they've built a warp bomb.
Which is like a great analogy for like the US in the 30s and the 40s. It's like they're unlocking the secrets of the atom, and the first thing they do is let's build a bomb. And it's like aliens watching us and be like, oh my goodness, they're gonna have limitless power soon. Oh my goodness, what are they doing? Why would you use that knowledge to make a bomb?
Yeah.
Because this planet has been in civil war for hundreds of years. The leaders of the two countries have never spoken to each other in their lifetime. And it's been like over 100 years since the leaders have met. So the one side has developed a bomb, and they, plan on using it to end the endless civil war.
How the hell did they get warm?
We gave it to them, Captain. We're less than 1 light year out from 0 Point.
0 Point.
Where we and the crew of Discovery opened up a wormhole to the future.
What happened was the opening, the temporal vortex, the temporal, where Discovery went into the future. Pike's Enterprise and a few other ships were there to defend. Well, it was so bright and could be seen from thousands of light years away that these scientists on this planet were able to watch the ships and how they moved and reverse engineer what they saw, which were the warp drives of these vessels. Now, whatever the device that they were using must have been sophisticated enough, one, or two. The light generated, the light generated from this from hundreds of light years away, it was impressive. So they reverse engineered what they saw during this battle to create a weapon of mass destruction to finally destroy the other faction on their planet. So, not to get too into detail, it was a reversed engineering scenario.
And I will say that's probably my biggest nitpick of the episode, because that seemed a little far-fetched.
It would have made more if they wanted to go that direction. If maybe during the battle and something exploded and flew and hit their planet, and it was a leftover warp core,
a shuttlecraft engine that they just assumed
and they engineered it to be a weapon.
I think that would be better.
That would have been better, in my opinion, as well. And then that way, because the reason that we had to bring that up, we have to that's the reason why we can resolve this episode.
To be honest, I'm giving this show a wide berth because of how well it was presented, and after the catastrophe of previous shows.
To family, then. Because that's what we are.
What the hell is wrong with you guys? Slap on a badge, put on a uniform, you think you can treat people this way? A lo mejor llegamos a la casa hoy. Hey, no hagas nada estúpido. No, tranquilo, mis amigos se encargaron de eso. 1, 2, 3. I'm just making the best of things. 21st century Earth isn't what I thought it would be. Everything's so intense. All the cars and the honking and shouting. It's dirty. It's music everywhere. I'm staying.
Chris, you know you can't do that. The timeline.
I never fit, Nothing stuck.
To family.
But I just don't want this to turn into episode 1 of season 2 of Picard of, hey, we're real Trek. And then we're just slowly going to drift into emotional, high-action Discovery schlock.
So I'm going to be reserved as you are, Pete, because we were the old bait and switch. We got it real hard on Picard. So much, I told Pete that I was very upset, almost to the point where I wasn't even going to give Strange New Worlds a chance. I wasn't even going to watch it. But I did, and I gave it a chance, and I'm glad that I did. And we are giving it a wide berth, not because of Picard or it's Star Trek, but because they earned it. They actually took the time to design the character. This is Star Trek. Did they get everything 100% right? No. If we had to grade it, I would give them an 87%.
Yeah, I'm really curious. Like after this, I want to look at the producers, the writing team, just to see how different it is from the other shows, because it definitely does feel different.
It is a very different feel, and it's a very welcome change.
General Order 1 applies.
We cannot interfere with their natural development. We cannot show ourselves
But
for
if
risk.
they've already seen us...
We cannot risk the possibility.
Well, so we just leave our people there?
Hardly.
So General Order 1, of course, in every Star Trek, you do not interfere with an alien culture. You don't do it. That
Pre-warp.
has come
Pre-warp.
pre-warp culture. And that comes from the Vulcans, who over their decades upon, I'm going to say hundreds of years of traveling, that's what they learned not to do.
As you know, the Vulcans invented first contact.
As they never fail to remind us.
And of course, Pike made the joke with Spock, of course, that they always, every chance that they get, they remind us that it was their idea. I thought that was a little cute.
So in the strictest of definitions, this is their moral quandary of, okay, did they achieve warp drive? Are we allowed to talk to them? No, they made a bomb, so we have to leave them alone to progress amongst themselves to see if they can evolve past their petty differences. But the problem they come to, that Pike has a problem with, is they only developed that bomb because of them. So, which I think is another metaphor in this grand thing of like, okay, Discovery really screwed up this franchise. Pike is going to come in and fix it.
Yes, I love it. So we brought up the Discovery to bring up how they concluded the episode, how they fixed everything. So, of course, without spoiling too much of it, they end up going in, rescuing. That was pretty good Star Trek action. It wasn't overdone. There was a few hand-to-hand combat scenes. They get number 1 back, and this is the discussion they're having in the elevator to the surface to where they can be beamed out. There's another thread that had been going on in the background, which was the original The Day the Earth Stood Still, which was playing on Pike's view screen in his home in Montana in the beginning of the episode. So that is
television, it looked like to me.
And that was reverberating through his mind through this episode. And that was when everybody beamed up except for Spock and Pike. And this is, of course, Pike didn't plan this, but it worked into the story where, because of Spock being half Vulcan and half human, the genetic alterations have worn off, and now Pike is using that to his advantage. These doors open, he says, "Take me to your leader," very much like The Day the Earth Stood Still. And he's negotiating with the head of this faction on this planet. And she's very much, and how do I don't want to be political.
Set in her ways.
She's set in her ways, very, very nationalist, it's our way or the highway.
We still don't even know what the other faction is like. They could be identical,
Correct. So what ends up correct. But what ends up happening is they have an argument, and she said, "We're done. Take them away." And of course, the communicators are in voice distance. He calls for the Enterprise. The Enterprise drops into low orbit, and the entire capital city can see it. And
pulls a Teddy Roosevelt. He's like, "I got the bigger stick."
Just like you said, whoever has the biggest stick wins. In this case, that is me.
That leads them into the discussion of bringing these two factions together. And they're not getting anywhere. They're not getting anywhere.
First time in centuries the leaders have met.
Centuries. But Pike beams down in the middle of this.
Hi.
And he gives him his spiel. And essentially shows footage of where we are at right now on Earth.
Our conflict also started with a fight for freedoms. We called it the Second Civil War.
then the Eugenics War, and finally, just World War III. This was our last day. What began as an eruption in one nation ended in the eradication of 600,000 species of animals and plants and 30% of Earth's population. Global suicide. What we gave you is the means to exterminate yourselves.
My favorite line from this episode is something that Pike said, where, and I want to remember how he said this. On my planet, we would fight over different ideas of liberty.
You'll use competing ideas of liberty to bomb each other to rubble just like we did, and then your last day will look just like this.
That's a very interesting thing that he said. Now, that's the most, in my opinion, the most science fiction of that. You know, it's communism, socialism, democracy, populism. It's all those. And they're talking about it in that way. And which version of liberty. And that's, but listen, we screwed up. Look what we did. And then he offers them the golden ticket, you know, Willy Wonka. Why not let us help you? Why don't you join the Federation?
Go to war with each other. Or join our Federation of Planets and reach for the stars.
We now get out to Earth and orbiting. I don't think we give it a name. It's similar to Space Dock, but it's not a space station. It is a space station.
Yeah, it
but
looks
what
like
you see,
the old regular one, kind of, but bigger and wider.
Bigger, and there were circular domes that were very well designed that have different habitats. We're sitting there with Admiral April, and we're talking, and he brings up what the loophole was. The loophole is we couldn't have broken General Order 1 because then we would have had to admit that the Discovery incident happened.
Which
is classified. So that was the loophole. So Discovery never happened.
I love these metaphors.
So
I used the loophole since the Council can't acknowledge that the battle ever actually took place.
It cannot acknowledge how the people of Kylie 279 acquired war.
Council's not happy about it. They're doubling down, renaming it the Prime Directive. Well, that'll never stick.
I'm actually genuinely happy, and this was a great start to a new series.
You know what's great is we don't have any predictions for next week because we're back to episodic television, baby.
I know. It's fantastic.